Voicing serious concerns over the deteriorating security situation and ongoing human rights abuses in the Central African Republic, the United Nations Security Council earlier in the week approved the establishment of nearly 12,000-strong United Nations peacekeeping operation to protect civilians and facilitate humanitarian access in the war-torn African country. The force authorized by the 15-member council will be known as MINUSCA and will consist of 10,000 troops, 1,800 police and 200 correction officers. Now, the UN operation will assume authority on September 15th from the African Union's 5,600-strong MISCA force, which was deployed in December. Now, meanwhile, 55 soldiers from the European Union's force UFO on Wednesday arrived in the capital Bangui with the aim of maintaining security and training local officers. Now, with the establishment of MINUSCA, the African Union force on ground will receive logistic support from the United Nations. Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwoche. You can share your thought with us and about the unrest in the Central African Republic on Twitter at TVC Africa Today, or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. A report to launch the show, and Africa Today will be right back. Welcome on.
In its quest to see the crisis rocking the Central African Republic come to an end, the United Nations Human Rights Council has called for immediate action from neighboring African nations to save the war-torn country from counting its losses daily. An independent expert, Marie-Theresa Keita Bokum, told the Council remedial solutions can no longer prevent chaos in the Central African Republic and the sub-region, adding that the Council should no longer be satisfied with counting the dead and other victims, whom are mostly women and children. Marie Keita stressed that it would be impossible for the transitional government to prepare next year's elections and improve the plight of the population without real assistance to turn the country into a functioning state and improve the human rights situation.
It is quite evident that without real help to make the state function and improve the human rights situation, I believe it will be impossible to achieve these objectives.
The ambassador of the Central African Republic, Leopold Samba, says his country exists in name only, as impunity reigned and the people fallen victims of violence committed by armed groups and militias, adding that immediate action was needed to save a condemned people. In spite of their declared will to govern, the transitional authorities need the means to exercise the functions of a state to provide justice and avoid impunity. Ambassador Samba urged African neighbors to help the Central African Republic to avoid spread of the intercommunal gangrene, which could lead to profound regional crisis.
The Central African Republic isn't holding out its hand like a beggar. It thinks that all Africa has a duty to come to its help, for its strategic geographical position should be taken into consideration if we want to avoid the gangrene that could contaminate the whole region. Unless action is taken, a serious intercommunal crisis could spread to a deep regional crisis.
Central African Republic has suffered chaos since December 2012, with several massacres by the Christian group Anti-Balaka, forcing thousands of Muslims to flee the country.
Welcome back to the program. Now, Christian Mukosa, an international researcher in the Central African Republic, says that the Central African Republic is gripped by a human rights and humanitarian crisis of historic proportion. By failing to respond more robustly and urgently, the international community has shown a callous disregard for the country's embattled civilians, abandoning them in their moment of need. I'm quoting him directly. Joining us to look at the crisis in the Central African Republic, we have Femi Akonde, TVC News international correspondent, with us in the studio today. Femi, you're welcome to Africa Today.
Always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Mike. Thank you.
And later on the show, we'll be linking up on phone with Dismas Mokoa, an international political analyst from Kenya. He'll be joining us from Nairobi later on. Now, Femi, you were in the Central African Republic shortly before Michel Jotodia was made interim president. You were there when he was president. You were there after he was. You were there when Catherine Samba Panza was made, and even after that. Now, comparing at the time, the way the crisis were at the time Michel Jotodia was there and now, what difference is there in the country between that time and now?
Well, I would say the level of violence has really escalated. Okay. That from the time Michel Jotodia left office as the president or head of state of the Central African Republic, and now that Catherine Samba Panza is in charge of affairs in the Central African Republic. Because when Michel Jotodia was there, the Seleka rebels held sway. They had the backing of the government. At least there was some kind of, let me call it, hierarchy in the Seleka formations. At least they could take orders from the president. The president could restrain them from carrying out some kind of brutal killings, and he was also able to curtail them a bit before he totally lost control of the Seleka groups. But when he left office as the head of state, the Seleka rebels had no government backing anymore, and they were kind of isolated in the whole conflict. Most of them had to be evacuated by the African Union peacekeepers to another military camp where their activities was curtailed by the military. And then the anti-Balaka militias, these ones are made up of mainly armed civilians without any basic military training. And they have been the one now that are on rampage in the Central African Republic. They have carried out heinous crimes, serious and grievous crimes against humanity. And right now, they are totally out of control. There's widespread looting, rape, that's sexual violence, and all sorts of atrocities that people are beginning to say tends towards genocide in the Central African Republic. So it's really a severe crisis now compared to where Michel Jotodia left it.
Okay. Now, let me ask. The anti-Balaka are trying to carry out their own, like you have enumerated now. But in true terms, you have spoken to the villagers, you have spoken to people on the grassroots in different parts of villages across the country. What do the anti-Balaka, what do they want, really?
They want revenge. They want to retaliate brutal killings and atrocities carried out against them and their people and the country, because they believe that the country belongs to them. And the Seleka rebels, most of them are foreigners that came in as mercenaries into the Central African Republic to fight on the Seleka side and in support of the former president, Michel Jotodia. So this has been really very difficult it became very difficult for the anti-Balaka and the majority of the population to bear these atrocities carried out by the Seleka rebels, and that gave birth to the anti-Balaka militia group. And since then, I would say, to some extent, they are able to achieve their aim, which is to put pressure on Michel Jotodia to resign. Of course, together with the international community, they're able to mount pressure on Jotodia, and Jotodia resign. And everyone expected that the anti-Balaka militias would just lay down their arms now that the so-called public enemy is out of the way. But no, they didn't stop. They took it further from there, and really, it has really gone far beyond control.
All right, now the anti-Balaka are carrying out looting and rape and so on, and different kind of atrocities you have called. Who are they carrying these things out against?
It's the Muslim population that are mostly targeted during these attacks, because right now they are the most vulnerable people in the country. And they believe during the reign of the Seleka and Michel Jotodia, the Muslims enjoyed some kind of favor from the government and protection. And immediately Michel Jotodia was out of the way, the Muslims ordinarily became the target of this Christian militia group. They have succeeded in chasing most of the Muslims living in the Central African Republic out of the capital, Bangui. Majority of them have fled to neighboring Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, and other bordering countries. And some of them have also fled to the northern part of the region, where they still have a large number of Muslim population residents there.
All right. Now, with the way things are going, do the citizens still have confidence in President Samba Panza?
Yes, they do. They expect a lot from the president, and I believe they are also aware that it's not going to be easy. She doesn't have that magic wand that they just expect her to use to just stabilize the situation.
The country overnight.
Yeah, overnight. They know it's a long process. It's going to take a lot of struggle, commitment by the government, and a strong political will to make sure that these warring factions are disarmed without bias to any armed group in the country, and also that peace is restored at all costs in the Central African Republic, because the citizens have suffered seriously for this escalating violence in the country. More than 1 million people have been displaced, and they live in camps for the internally displaced under the kind of conditions that they are faced with are something that really you should not subject human beings to. So it's really a very difficult situation for the internally displaced in Central African Republic. And I think all that is on their mind now, what they want now is peace, lasting peace.
Okay. I'll come to the issue of humanitarian crisis later on, or humanitarian assistance or aid or conditions later on. But as it is right now, you have, apart from Bangui, you have traveled to other parts of the country, regions of the country. But what part of the country is this crisis mostly pronounced?
Yeah, before now it was in Bangui. Before most of the Muslims, like I said, have fled Bangui. So they are now pushing the violence to other parts of the country where, like Sibut, and some other like Gobongo. There are some places in the country where they believe some of these Muslims are still residing. So they are taking the violence is gradually moving towards those areas, and they're pushing gradually, like what Amnesty International, the international community, want to call ethnic cleansing. So they are gradually cleansing the country of the Muslim population, and this is a gradual process. And also the Muslims, especially in the northern parts of the country, are also standing up to defend themselves. Some elements of the Seleka rebels are still in the country. Some of them also have their guns. So there are situations where there would be exchange of gunfire between these anti-Balaka militia groups and the Seleka rebels, and this has resulted in many deaths.
But do the anti-Balaka feel or think or reason that all members of the Seleka movement or Seleka rebels are from other countries? Don't they think there are some of them who are citizens of the country who have the right to stay in the country?
Yeah, there are some of them who are citizens of the country. But now the thing is, it's not about the Central African Republic and Chadian elements fighting in the Central African Republic. It's now like a sectarian crisis between the Christian population and the Muslim population. So now they don't really care if you're a Muslim from Chad, from Central Africa, from Nigeria, or wherever. As long as they can identify that you're a Muslim, you'd come under attack.
But we remember when President Samapanza was made interim president, she gave an assurance that she doesn't really care whether it's Muslim or Christian or something, as the case may be. In fact, she even went ahead to make members of the Seleka rebels as part of her cabinet, as the case may be. Now, what has the situation? Has she made any statement giving assurance to citizens to calm down, or telling them to have faith in the country or something? Has there been any reaction or statement from her all the while?
Yeah, she has made several statements over and over again, reassuring residents and the population in the Central African Republic that her government has come to protect them, to stop the violence. And it's really in a way working, because the formation of her cabinet, she integrated some members of the Seleka rebels and also appointed some of their key leaders as ministers, appointed them as ministers in her government. And this has in a way been able to really maybe curtail the excesses of the Seleka rebels, because some of these leaders, like her Minister of Defense is a senior Seleka leader. He has been able to prevail on the Seleka members to stop the violence, to cease fire. But the anti-Balaka militia, they also had their own representatives appointed in government, but along the line they pulled out of government, and even the ones in government now are no longer seen as representing the interests of the anti-Balaka militias. So this has really been the problem, because now both parties are not represented in the government of Catherine Samba-Panza. It's just, it now appears as if it's only the Seleka group and their interest that is represented and protected by this government, while the anti-Balakas are just left to do anything they deem fit.
Okay. It's all right. Now, the Seleka militia, meaning in the National Language Alliance in Sango, was responsible for widespread and systematic human rights abuses in the Central African Republic in 2013. Now, after a murderous rampage that started in the northeast, the Seleka spread out across the country, seizing the capital Bangui and ousting then President Francois Bozize in March 2013. Now, over the following 10 months, Seleka forces killed countless civilians, burned numerous villages and looted thousands of homes. We'll go on a quick break in Africa Today. We'll come back shortly. All right, thanks for staying with us on Africa Today. Now, international forces are trying to end reprisal attacks and restore law and order to halt a growing humanitarian crisis that has displaced more than 800,000 people and left more than half the country's 4.6 million people in urgent need of aid. Now, today on the show, we have been looking at the conflict in the Central African Republic. And right now, we have Victor Hai, an analyst on African affairs, is joining us from Germany. Victor, it's good to have you on Africa Today. Now,
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome to the program. Now, let me ask you, the problem of crisis in the Central African Republic has become unending, as the case may be. Why is it so persistent?
Well, clearly, the very nature of the crisis itself is what has made it a little complicated. I mean, where there are issues, it becomes a little easier. But when you find people attacking and killing each other across religious divides or across tribal divides without any clear leaders that you can negotiate with, then obviously it's going to get more complicated. There are no obvious negotiators in this matter that you can talk to. If you had clear rebel leaders and clear arrowheads that you could talk to and negotiate with, then it's easier to manage the crisis. But in this particular case, neighbors are raising arms against neighbors, Christians against Muslims, and, so it becomes a little difficult. And that's what makes this particular crisis a little bit peculiar.
All right, we hear the UN is trying to send in troops and so on, and so many analysts feel that the UN is wasting so much time in sending troops to the Central African Republic. Now, what's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is simple: better late than never. And the reason is simply this. This crisis has been going on for too long. And like I said earlier, even when you send people down, you need to know where the clear divides are. If you send troops, if you put boots on the ground, so to say, there is a need to know who's killing who and how are they going about it. Because you find a situation where the Muslims are amongst the community, the Christians are amongst the community, people speaking the same language, just a religious divide. It's a complicated war. It's a complicated crisis, if you ask me. It has taken so long, but don't forget, there are crises across the region. All over Africa. You have Mali, which is, it's being resolved right now. You have Sudan, which is ongoing. All of these are begging for attention, Somalia isn't quite resolved yet, so there's quite a lot to do. And before you deploy troops, you've got to be able to get the buy-in of even those who are going to send the troops, the boots on the ground. So it has taken quite a long time. I agree totally. Some may argue that perhaps it's because it's Africa, but I do not necessarily think so. It's taken so long, and it wasn't long that they had, if you like, a consensus leader, and this is the person with whom you can negotiate and say, okay, now we want to send troops or boots on the ground to help you. How would you want us to do it? What number would you think is sufficient and all that? You do not just send people. There's a government on the ground right now. You cannot just send people without, the buy-in of the government on the ground. So I think these are part of the reason why the situation is the way it is.
All right, Victor, with this persistent crisis, who do we hold responsible for all the crises in the Central African Republic, in your own opinion?
In my opinion, I would say the ordinary person on the street.
Why is that?
Because what is happening is senseless. It's senseless. Why would you want to kill someone because they have a different religion, from yours? Obviously, of course, politicians will have to agree, have engineered for their own selfish reasons. But these same politicians would first of all send their families abroad, and then they begin to instigate the ordinary folks on the street. Now, unfortunately, the level of poverty, the level of illiteracy, and the level of, if you like, ignorance is what has been capitalized upon. And this has been going on for too long. It's time Africans, really rose up to the situation and said, no, enough to these manipulating politicians. You might say the politicians, but this has gone on for too long. And the other Africans should learn and know that the people who are pushing them into doing all of this don't have their families on the ground. And so that's why I would say the ordinary folks on the street, on the ground.
All right, Victor, let me ask you this before I let you go. Now, so many people feel that President Catherine Samba-Panza might not be the right person, being a woman and maybe some other reasons to be in charge of a country like the Central African Republic at this critical time. What's your take on that?
I don't agree. And the reason is simple. She was a popular choice.
Okay.
Against all odds. She was a popular choice. You understand? She was a popular choice. It could have been a man, not a woman. She was a consensus, if you like a consensus candidate.
Okay.
She was a popular candidate, the most popular candidate, in spite of the fact that she was a woman. She earned it. She was someone that they trusted. She was someone that they felt could help, under the circumstances. So I do not think that that's the reason. It is too early yet. The killings have been going on. Her getting there necessarily would not have changed things overnight. The suspicions on the ground are there. They would not change overnight because a Daniel or a Daniela, permit me to put it that way, has come to judgment in a manner of speaking. These things take time. She's there now, and I think her presence there is the reason the UN can do what it is doing right now, because they have someone they can talk to, someone they can trust, and someone the people trust.
All right, Victor, thank you. Thank you very much for your time on Africa Today. Thank you. All right, before we go, I was going to ask you about humanitarian problem or crisis in the Central African Republic. You went in some hospitals, you went in some clinics and health centers, and you even went to some camps and so on. Can you describe what you saw there?
Yeah, let me start with the camps. Really, if you go to the camps for the internally displaced in Central African Republic, they live under makeshift tents. Okay. And these tents are not even, because now it's the rainy season, even in Central Africa, and these tents are not even strong enough to withhold the pressure from the rain. And there's usually torrential rainfall in Central African Republic for 9 months consistently. And if this crisis has not ended now, they'll still be in that camps in their camps for the next 9 months. Most times they don't even get food to eat. When food supplies are provided by the aid organizations working to bring relief to the internally displaced in Central African Republic, most times these food items are also intercepted by these armed groups who are also hungry and they need food to eat. They intercept food supplies and other relief materials meant for the internally displaced and then confiscate it for their own use. If you go to the hospitals also, medical supplies are low. There are no drugs. There are even human resources, the doctors that would come and treat patients. Everybody is either at the camp for the internally displaced or somewhere safe in the country, or some have even fled the country. So there are no drugs, no doctors. Even the facility, the medical facility is very poor. If you go to most of their hospitals, you find like the doctors across borders, the Red Cross and other non-governmental organizations, they are the ones working to give medical aid to the vulnerable population of the Central African Republic. So it's really a very severe humanitarian crisis in that country.
All right, talking about the spread of soldiers, the available soldiers from, or the few soldiers from the African Union and even the Central African Republic troops, Are they located just within Bangui, or they are spread across the country, or how?
Yeah, majority of them are located inside Bangui.
Okay.
Because that is the seat of power, that is the capital of the country. Okay. So first they have to secure the seat of government, at least to create some kind of political stability in that country. And then other neighboring towns just around Bangui to also ward off any maybe insurgents or any armed group from coming in to attack civilians inside Bangui. Their focus really now, if you ask me, I would say it's just the capital, Bangui, even though there are pockets of them around other communities that is surrounding Bangui and regions surrounding Bangui. But there are still a lot of areas in the country that they have not even seen, or the presence of these peacekeepers are not felt at all. And those are the areas that this violence has continued persistently. And those are the areas where these soldiers need to get to as soon as possible to at least stop the killings.
Femi Akonde, thank you very much for joining Africa Today.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we also thank Victor Hai for joining us from Germany earlier on. Now, be it unrest, crisis, or conflict, or any other adjective you can think about, just remember that things have fallen apart in the Central African Republic, and the center can no longer hold until peace returns to the country. And our citizens no longer live in fear of being lynched by militia. That's a show for today. You can watch other episodes of the program on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. And until the next one, I am Okwoche. And remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.